Welcome back to the MMA Training Bible Step-by-Step Guide to Building Unstoppable Endurance in 3 months. I'm Dr. Jason Gillis. You know, we've really covered a lot in this course so far. In the first half, we've been looking at the science of mixed martial arts, and in session 1, we focused on understanding the metabolic demands of mixed martial arts. In session number 2, we learned how to target specific energy systems by manipulating work-to-rest ratio. In session number 3, you learned how to avoid overtraining, and we actually gave you a couple tips to do that. First was recognizing the signs and symptoms of overtraining, and then we taught you that if you engage in a periodized training plan, you can also reduce your risk of overtraining. And that's what we covered in session 4. We also talked briefly about another way to avoid overtraining, and that's by implementing a regular program of performance testing. And that's what we want to talk about today. Now, if you implement an appropriate performance testing strategy, then you should be able to optimize your adaptation and training and reduce your risk for overtraining and ultimately monitor your performance. So your learning objectives here, I want you to understand how to implement a testing battery to assess physical and mental performance in the following domains. First, we're going to look at psychological skills and mood tests. Then we're going to look at body size and composition. We're going to review tests for flexibility and muscular power and strength and endurance. We're going to review tests for anaerobic performance and aerobic performance, and we're going to finish off, and I want to show you a sport-specific performance test for mixed martial arts. So these are the different components that we're going to cover in this video lecture. First, we're going to look at performance testing in mixed martial arts. Then we're going to cover psychological tests followed by body size and composition tests. We're going to look at tests for flexibility, and then we're going to look at tests for muscular parameters like strength and power and endurance. We're going to talk about a few tests for aerobic and anaerobic assessment, and then we're going to cover those sport-specific tests that we mentioned. Before we get too far into this though, I want you to download a couple documents. So let me just show you what those documents are. The first document, it's a little book that I've given you. Now, this book is called The MMA Training Bible's Guide to Performance Testing in Mixed Martial Arts. So we give you a little overview about the MMA Training Bible, of course you know, and then we cover all of the different protocols in great detail. Now, the reason why I cover them and the reason why I'm giving you this book here is because if I covered all these tests in detail in this video lecture, it would take hours. So in order to be a little more efficient with our time, I'm giving you this book. So know that this has the detailed protocols of all the different tests that we're going to talk about here today. And the other document that I want to bring up, it's the data collection book. So when you actually go, after you've read about the test, after you've watched the video lecture and you're ready to do the test, you're going to print this book out, and this is going to have all the areas that you can fill out, all the different results from all your different tests. So please go ahead and download all of these books, both of these books, in the download section. So let's get back to the video lecture, and let's just start by looking at performance testing, and let's talk general. So what's the purpose of a test? Well, there are some limitations. No test out there is going to be able to predict how you're going to perform on fight day. It's just that tests don't work that way, but they can offer a number of benefits. So one, they can help you evaluate your strengths and your weaknesses, which is great. They can help you clarify your training goals. For example, if you identify that you're really weak in muscular endurance and muscular endurance is important in mixed martial arts, then that can help shift your training goals to focusing on maybe what your weaknesses are. It can also help evaluate the effectiveness of any training program that you're implementing. If you engage in pre-post testing, which is something that we build into our periodized training plans here at the MMA Training Bible. And also, very importantly, it can help you monitor your adaptation to training. And ideally, it'll help you avoid a maladaptation to training. There's a couple more things I want to mention, a couple more fundamentals of testing that you need to be aware of. And this is a really important one to start off. Fighters must be medically cleared to take part in testing and even any sort of training program. Now, this is very important. Whether it's you who are going to be taking part in these tests or you're going to be working with someone else, you need to make sure that they're healthy. So to help you with this process, the first thing that I'll mention here is in our data collection book, the first thing we have here is a health screening. So this is an example of a health screening that you can fill out or you can use with fighters that you're working with. And it just collects all sorts of health information, and it can bring up sort of red flags, things that may increase the participant risk during testing. So you can implement this, or at the very least you should have the doctor implement all of these different tests to make sure that your athlete is safe before they begin testing. And there's also, if we keep on scrolling down here, a little signature section where you can say, yes, I've filled this form out to the truest nature that I can. There's also another form called performance information sheets, and this basically is a consent form that says that whoever's going to be taking part in the testing understands exactly what is involved in the test, and they freely take part under their own accord. So these are two very important documents that ultimately help protect whoever's doing the testing and really protect the person who's being tested. You want to make sure that they're healthy and ready to go, not in any danger. So that's the first thing. After you make sure that the fighter is medically cleared, then other things you need to take into account is whenever you're doing testing with a fighter, I recommend including everybody in the testing. Include the fighter, obviously, but include the entire coaching staff. If there are any other personal trainers that are working with the fighter, they need to be included as well. So everybody should be included in a transparent process. You should conduct testing every few months because one test alone, it's not very useful. There are norms out there that you can compare your testing results to, but the best results that you get from a test is when you compare how one person does over the long run. And the MMA Training Bible does build this into its periodized training plan, testing every few months or so. You need to make sure that you're reducing error in the test, and I can't emphasize this enough. This is very, very important. So there's a couple guidelines that you can follow to try to reduce the error of a test. You can refrain from intense physical activity before the testing. You need to make sure that you're always testing at the same time of day because a lot of things can vary over the course of a day from hormonal interactions to body temperature regulation. You need to reduce any learning effects during testing by making sure that whoever is doing the testing is familiar with the test. You need to provide verbal encouragement during the test because someone's effort can be influenced by how much you encourage them. You need to make sure that the testing equipment works properly, and you need to make sure that you know how to use the testing equipment. So all of this stuff, let me bring up another document here and show you. All of this stuff is outlined in this document, the MMA Training Bible's Guide to Performance Testing. So the first thing that we cover here, it's chapter 1, it's the fundamentals of performance testing. It's just in detail what we just mentioned. So please go ahead and read that. The next thing that we want to look at, it's psychological profiling and mood tests. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and have a look at that. In the area of psychological assessments, I like to talk about 3 different components. One, it's goal setting. The other one is performance profiles. And the final, it's mood. Now, with regards to goal setting, I think this is probably one of the most important things that a fighter can do. And in fact, the MMA Training Bible, we think it's so important that we've created a standalone course that you can enroll in. And I highly encourage you to enroll in that as soon as possible. So what you get in that course is everything you get here except a lot more detail. For example, you'll get the performance profiles, but I'll also take you through a step-by-step process for setting compelling goals in the area of your technical development, in your physical conditioning, and your psychological skills. So I really recommend, I can't emphasize enough, get over and enroll in that course and take that. It really is the foundation of everything that you do. And then we have performance profiles. So let's go and review that. So this is in chapter 2, psychological profiling and moods, in your document that you should have already downloaded. And what we're looking at now is a performance profile. And if you've gone through the goal setting workshops, you've seen these before. And we have performance profiles in 3 different areas. One, it's your technical development, which is first. And what we do is we break down your technical development in a couple different areas. We have standing striking, ground-based striking, submissions, takedowns, ground-based wrestling and grappling, and standing wrestling and grappling. And these are further divided into offensive and defensive components. So what you need to do is you need to rank yourself on a scale of 1 with poor performance and 10 with best performance in all of these areas. So let's say that standing striking offensive, you think you're pretty good, so you rank yourself at around a 7. But maybe you're not as good defensively at handling strikes, standing strikes, so maybe you put yourself somewhere around a 4 or a 5. And you do this for all the different areas, and what you end up getting at the result, or at the end of this, it's kind of like a wonky wheel where there's some areas that are better than others. And the nice thing about that is you can easily see the areas that you need to focus on for future improvement. And then here's the example for the performance profile for physical conditioning, and it's broken down into areas of endurance, agility, flexibility, muscular factors, nutrition, and weight management. Again, shade in the areas where you think your proficiency lays. So it's going to be 1 with poor all the way up to 10 for outstanding or the best possible. And finally, we have a performance profile for psychological skills, and it's broken down in the areas of motivation, confidence, goal setting, which at the end of that goal setting course it should be a 10, arousal regulation both in training and competition, and concentration. So please read the detailed protocols, the detailed descriptions of these in this document, and then I think you'll be comfortable going to fill those out. The next thing I want to talk about is the Brunel mood scale. So let's go back over to the PowerPoint. So the Brunel mood scale, one of the first things, unfortunately, that you start to notice change when you start to overtrain, it's your mood. You feel all sorts of different changes. You feel less vigor, you feel more angry, maybe you feel more confused, slight depression, fatigue. So the Brunel mood scale tries to measure all of these components. It assesses your current mood state in the areas of anger, confusion, depression, fatigue, tension, happiness, and vigor. And you assign a score on a 5-point scale in all of these areas. A whole bunch of questions I'll show you about in a second. 0 is not at all, 1 is a little, 2 is moderately, 3 is quite a bit, 4 is extremely. So let's go back over and have another look at that at the Brunel mood scale. So what you're doing is, this is it. You can print this off, you can read all about it, and then in the data collection book you'll fill this out. And you're just going down here on the scale of 0 all the way up to 4 and just checking where you feel. Anger, alertness, all the way down through. And then what you do is you add up all these components. So you see here, number 3, it's anger. You put the score that you had here. Annoyed. Annoyed is number 4, so you put the score in here. Bad tempered is number 6, so you add up your score here. Bitter, number 7. You get the point. So you end up getting these subdomains of anger. You add up the total score. So you end up getting scores for all of these different subdomains. And this is what you track over time. And what you'll probably find is, as you start to move into overtraining, you'll see certain things change. Maybe you'll become more angry. Maybe you'll increase tension. Maybe you'll increase fatigue. So those sorts of things. And unfortunately, this is one of the best measures for overtraining that we have, because performance factors, like we talked about before, they really start to dip down over after you're already overtraining for a period of time. So let's go back over to that PowerPoint and let's have a look at what's next. I recommend the sit and reach as a simple measure of flexibility around the hips. So let's have a look at this test in our document. So I'm looking at the flexibility chapter, chapter 3. Again, you should have downloaded this, and this is what the test looks like. So you're going to need a flexible piece of measuring tape that's marked off in centimeters or inches, ideally, and you're going to need some sticky tape to tape it to the ground. So the first thing you do is you tape that long, flexible tape to the ground, and then you put a piece of tape perpendicular to that tape at the 15-inch mark. And then you're going to sit down with your heels at the 15-inch mark. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to bend over at the hips with both hands and push out as far as you can and hold that for about 2 seconds. And that is the simple assessment. It's how far you've gotten as measured from the distance between the bottom of the tape and where your fingers are touching. Both fingers are touching. You do 2 trials and take the average between the trials, and that's the score. So let's go back and look at that next test. So let's have a look at body size and composition. And there's really 2 different areas that we talk about here. One is body size, which focuses on measures of weight, height, and girths. It also focuses on body mass index, which is a pretty simple calculation described in the download. Now girths, that's just the circumference of various limbs, like how big your arms are, for example. Those are all pretty good measures. Body composition, on the other hand, it refers to the composition of fat mass and lean mass in your body. And because mixed martial arts, it's a weight class sport, you really want to make sure that you're familiar with the most common techniques that can help you get to where you need to be, to help you get to that ideal weight class for you. Now, you need to be aware of a couple different methods that are used to assess body composition. One, it's the skin fold. So basically all this is, it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. You grab a hold of somebody's fat and then you put what's called a caliper over their skin fold, and then you measure the thickness of that skin fold. And it's a pretty good method, but it's not the best method. If you're talking about the gold standard method for assessing body composition, it's probably going to be some sort of a scan that can separate your lean and fat mass, but those are pretty expensive. There's another method called water displacement or underwater weighing. It's based on Archimedes' principle, and it requires a big tank of cold water, and the local university may have one, but either way it's going to cost you some money, and it's not very practical. There's another one called air displacement or a bod pod. A lot of places have this, but again, it's going to charge you. Bioelectrical impedance are widely available in many different gyms, but it's going to be influenced by a lot of things, from your hydration status to a couple other factors. So I'm going to recommend that you find a skilled professional to do this for you. And ideally, I think, and maybe realistically, that's going to be a skilled professional who knows how to perform skin fold assessments. So what I want to do now is just kind of review some of these different assessments so you have an idea of what we're looking for. So this is covered in Chapter 4, Body Size and Composition of the Download. So the body size, weight, and circumference, those things are covered here. If you're going to do circumferences, then you can use a little tape. It's all rolled up. Then this is often used by a group of people called kinanthropometrists who are really, that's their job, to do these sorts of measurements. And this is the type of tape they use. Now here are some examples and descriptions of circumferences, where they're taken and how to perform them. And of course, you know, if you follow these protocols quite precisely, then I don't see any reason why you can't do these. But just make sure that you landmark appropriately and you're being very precise here. So these are all measures of circumference, which are pretty great. But then you have measures of body composition. And body composition, remember, it separates fat mass and fat-free mass. And these are different areas that are commonly assessed with skin folds. And you can scroll through these at your leisure. Again, these are the different tools that are used. These are easily purchased online, but there's some calibration issues, there's some accuracy issues with these plastic ones. But the big expensive ones, these are probably going to set you back hundreds of dollars, so it's really not worth it. It really is worth you going to a skilled professional who knows how to do this and having them pinch that fold and assess it accurately. But just so you know, these are the different areas, and you can have all different numbers and locations of sites taken. In general, the more sites that are pinched, the better, the more accurate your prediction of body fat percentage is going to be. I just do want to mention one more thing. A lot of fighters feel like body percent or the percentage of body fat that they have is really the best measure. But the scientific community is kind of mixed on this, because there's a calculation that ultimately spits out that percentage body fat, and there's some error associated with that calculation. So I think a good measure is just actually taking the thickness of that skin fold, because what happens when you exercise more is the actual physical thickness of that skin fold will change. Now you can look at the individual skin fold thicknesses at various locations, or you can look at the sum of a couple different skin folds. But either way, I like to recommend fighters look at the actual skin fold thickness as opposed to the percent body fat, even though everyone likes to talk about the body fat percentage. So let's go ahead and look at that next area for assessment. When we talk about the assessment of muscular parameters, we're talking about the assessment of muscular power and muscular strength and muscular endurance. Now, let's take each of these in turn. So muscular power is critical, we know, in mixed martial arts performance, and we want to be able to measure the power of both your upper and lower body. Two simple tests that can help us do this are the vertical jump and the seated medicine ball toss. So let's have a look at each of these. Let's go back to the document, and now we're looking at Chapter 5, the vertical jump. So in order to do this, you're going to need a long measuring tape, probably at least 3 meters long. So a couple of flexible meter-long tapes stitched or taped together, they should do the trick. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking this long string of tape and you're going to be taping them vertically on the wall. So the first thing that you need to do is stand close to the wall with your dominant arm outstretched, and you need to mark the point where your finger touches. That's your starting position. Next, squat down to 90 degrees and hold for about 3 seconds, and then jump as high as possible, and you touch your finger to the wall at the highest point of your jump. And then all you do is you just take the difference between the starting position and the last position, and that's your vertical jump. And if you want, you can also calculate the power in watts using an equation that I've provided below. So there's a lot of different ways to do the vertical jump, and probably the main difference you may note here is I'm asking you to pause at the bottom at 90 degrees for 3 seconds. The reason why is because I think this increases the accuracy of the measurement, so you know that everyone is getting down to the same distance, and also it can reduce the activation of muscle spindles, which may increase the variability of your score. So the seated medicine ball toss, that's how we're going to assess upper body muscular power. Now, all you're doing here is you're placing this long tape, probably the one you've already used, and place it on the ground, sit on it, make sure you tape it down, and then you choose a medicine ball. 5 kilograms is probably about right, and you just throw it as far as possible. You note where it lands. Real easy. The next assessments that we want to look at is for muscular strength, and you can see assessments for muscular strength and the associated descriptions in Chapter 6. Muscular strength, it influences a lot of wrestling and grappling performance, so we should measure it. Now, two simple tests that you can use are the back squat and the bench press. Now, you need to make sure that the person is proficient in technique, or you're proficient in this particular technique. Now, both of these tests, they're going to require the performing of 3 to 5 repetition maximum. That means that you shouldn't be able to perform 6, you shouldn't be able to perform 2. You want to have that failure repetition between 3 and 5 where you can't push any more. Now, what you're doing is you're going to have the participant take about a 15-minute self-organized warm-up on their own, and then it's going to be a specific warm-up on the bench press or the squat. So you're going to put on a little bit of weight, a little bit of resistance, and they should be able to complete about 5 or 10 repetitions. So following that, they take about 60 seconds rest or so, and then you estimate a load that will allow the participant to complete about 3 to 5 repetitions. And they go until they can't go anymore. So there's a couple issues with this test. First and foremost, technique and safety are critical, and you need to use spotters. Can't emphasize that enough. Also, sometimes when you find that you're doing multiple sets to try to find that failure repetition, you're going to introduce an artificial fatigue that's going to influence the results of your test. So you really want to try to hit that failure repetition in the 3 to 5 range on that next set, on that first work set. Let's go on to talk about assessments for muscular endurance. So that's going to be in the next chapter. So now we're looking at chapter 7 for muscular endurance. And there's 2 different assessments that we're going to use to look at muscular endurance. One, it's the curl-up test, and the other one, it's the push-up test. Muscular endurance, it's going to influence your ability to perform prolonged actions in cage, like combinations or submissions and grappling for body control, things of that nature. There's 2 commonly used tests to assess muscular endurance, and one is the curl-up test, the other one, it's the push-up test. So for the curl-up test, you're going to need a stopwatch, a metronome, which there's tons of apps out there that you can download as a metronome. You're going to need measuring tape and sticky tape. So if we look to this picture up here, what we're seeing is the curl-up test set up. We're going to be taping 2 pieces of tape 10 centimeters apart, perpendicular across this mat. And you're going to set the participant up so that they're laying down with their fingers just touching one board of the tape. And with each curl up, they need to cover the distance of 10 centimeters. So you set the metronome to 50 beats per minute, and with each beat, they either move up or down. So beep, up, beep, down. And what you immediately notice is that this sets the pace. You're not going to be able to do more than 25 curl ups per minute. And this test is assessed by doing as many curl ups as you possibly can, and there's really no time frame. So this test is going to be more appropriate for beginners as opposed to advanced people with really strong abs. The push-up test is dead simple. You're just doing as many push-ups as you could possibly do in a row without breaking technique. So again, make sure that you follow these protocols specifically. All the details are in here. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and have a look at those next round of tests. As you learned in sessions 1 and 2, mixed martial arts is a sport characterized by repeated high-intensity, short-duration efforts interspersed with brief recovery periods for a prolonged period of time over the course of a whole round and over the course of a whole fight. That means that we're activating both aerobic and anaerobic energy systems. So we want to be able to measure both of those, your performance in both of those. Now, one of the more established tests used to assess your ability to perform repeated high-intensity anaerobic efforts like those required in the cage, it's the running-based anaerobic sprint test. Now, alternatively, the bulky 15-minute track run, it's a test that can assess your aerobic fitness, and it's more indicative of your ability to perform at a repeated high intensity over the course of a whole fight, which in most cases it's about 15 minutes long. So let's have a look at that first test, the running-based anaerobic sprint test. So for this test, you're going to need a 35-meter track, 2 stopwatches, 2 assessors, and a counter. So the first thing that you need to do is find a suitable straight line course marked off with 35 meters. Now after that, you need to undertake a suitable warm-up, and then you're ready to begin the test. So note that one assessor is going to ensure the participant takes only 10 seconds of rest between each sprint, and the other assessor is going to record the time of each 35-meter sprint. So what you can do is you can quantify your ability to resist fatigue, which is really one of the cool things about this test, by using the percent decrement score. And I've shown you how to do that over in the book. So let me just quickly skip over there so you can see. We're scrolling through the tests. So here's the calculation that you can do to see how you fatigue over these repeated sprints. And again, I'm going to direct you to the details in the protocol in chapter 8. And the other test that we were talking about is the bulky 15-minute track run for aerobic fitness. So let's go to that down here. So for this test, you'll need a 400-meter track, a stopwatch, one assessor, and one counter. And so in this test, all you're doing is you're just running around a 400-meter track for 15 minutes, and the distance that you achieved in this total time is recorded, and you can use that distance to estimate your VO2 max using this formula right over here. And again, I'm going to refer to you to the protocol here and to the examples so you can calculate all of those things. Let's go back to the video lecture, and let's have a look at that next test. The fighter's drill, which is what we're going to cover next, is our sport-specific test. All it does is attempt to replicate the demands of a typical bout of MMA. So we're looking at having fighters repeat 4 MMA drills back-to-back in a self-paced manner for 3 5-minute rounds with 1 minute rest between each round. So for this, you're going to require a large area, preferably a cage, 1 40-kilogram grappling dummy, a stopwatch, a counter, and 2 experienced pad holders. So first, the fighter is always going to start in the center of the cage facing towards drill 1, and they have to be in a fighting stance. So what's going to happen is they're going to make their way through the 4 drills back to back in a self-paced manner for 5 minutes, and that's round 1, and then they're going to rest for 60 seconds. And then they're going to complete the same thing for 2 additional rounds, same sequence, same 60 seconds of rest between each round. It really is like a non-title fight. So the whole test is going to last 17 minutes, 3 times 5-minute rounds, with 2 60-second rests in between each round. So the way that you assess performance here is you're counting the total number of drills completed during each 5-minute round and then over the entire test. And if you want, you can measure other things that you have, like heart rate would be pretty good over the course of the whole test and in each round. You should check out the downloaded document for a description of each of the drills, but drill 1, it's a striking combination. Drill 2, it's a takedown. Drill 3, it's ground-based striking and submission. And then drill 4, it's a very powerful kick or a punch. Ideally, drill 4 is going to be done with some sort of a pad that can quantify the amount of force that you're able to generate. So let's recap. In this session, you learned how to implement a testing battery. You learned the components of that testing battery, which includes psychological tests, psychological assessments for skills and mood, assessments for body size and composition, for flexibility, for muscular power, strength and endurance, for anaerobic and aerobic performance, and finally, sport-specific testing. And remember, you should be referring to those downloaded documents for all the details, the specific protocols, and then when it comes time to implement these tests, make sure you have downloaded that data collection booklet and you can record everything there. So that's it for this session. I hope you learned a couple things. I hope you drew a distinction or two, and I look forward to seeing you in part 2 of this course, where we're going to start to develop your periodized training plan. Take care.